So round 4 of the Motogp Championship took us to the historic Jerez for the Spanish Grand Prix. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the race weekend is my co-host Dill. Now, usually we start off with Moto3, and that is what we're going to do today, but the first sort of topic that we have for Moto3 kind of was across the whole weekend, so I think we'll sort of take it out and sort of just discuss it in general before we hop into the specific classes. And that was the track conditions. So on Saturday, we had fairly heavy rain, and basically from that point onwards, even though the conditions cleared up and everything dried out, we had the issue of wet patches, something that has come up before at Jerez, but seemed to be worse this year than we've seen previously. And that's when the water seems to rise back through, causing patches. I don't know if you know any more about it, Dill. Like if you could explain it any better than I can. I think they call them sort of weepers, but the water seems to get on the track, soak in, and then come back up through the surface later on, even though the track's dried out. Very, very strange conditions this weekend.
From what I can tell, it's something to do with like the soil under the track basically absorbs it, and then it basically sweats it back up onto the surface. Is the way that I look at it, and from what I've seen of some of the more experts talking about the track surfaces, and to say it's been an issue before. We've had it in multiple different tracks, but we've had it here in Jerez before. Everybody knows that Jerez is one of those tracks that doesn't dry very fast. So we have an issue where if we do get rain, if we have a rain on a Friday, it'll never be perfect because we had obviously rain. I think 6 a.m. Saturday was kind of bucking it down, but by the time we got to any of the normal sessions, it was pretty much overcast and stopped raining, but the track was just kind of a bit damp. So even from there to the last laps of the GP race, I was still a bit tentative of the last corner just because of that small sweat that was in the last corner, just slightly about a meter away from the curb. That line we'll probably touch on a lot in Moto 2, but it was just so treacherous, and it just, you could see throughout 3 races on Sunday they had the diminished adhesion flag up on the outside of the turn 12 and into turn 13, and you could see as well on the sighting lap a lot of the GP riders having kind of a weird line through and having a little quick look on the way to the grid. So it was definitely something the riders are aware of. Strangely enough, Lars Capirossi, safety director, was interviewed on TNT before the GP race and basically said there's absolutely nothing wrong. So typical Dorna MotoGP, kind of just like lying to us, saying there's nothing
Covered
wrong
over the
when we're wrong.
cracks.
Yeah, exactly. It's clear to everyone that there was issues. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. It was unfortunate because it definitely cost people some races, and yeah, it kind of ruined the last corner because I don't think we saw any drama at the last corner into any really late starts of any of the races. So it kind of just took that wild card out of it for us, really, because I think even in the GP race, I think Pecco goes wide once he picks up the bike so much that he leaves 2 people through. So it was like people were just afraid of the corner, and even as a viewer, you were kind of a bit tense when anyone was going in side by side, or if anyone was trying to maybe taking time out was right in front, you were kind of thinking, oh no, wait till he gets the last corner, will that bite him? But no, thankfully, it was okay for most races.
Yeah, it's one of those things the riders couldn't do a lot about it. It's something that comes up a lot when they test at Jerez in the winter. I think that's actually what caused Alvaro Bautista's big crash in testing, wasn't it? When he hurt his
And
neck.
Johnny
And
Ray's
Johnny
happened
Ray
to
as
Johnny
well.
Ray as well in the last corner.
Yeah. So
His
there
first
you
few
go
laps
then.
on the
So
R1.
same part
Yeah,
of the circuit. Which kind of shows
exactly.
that it is
Exactly.
a consistent issue. Few areas were worth noting. On Sunday, it seems to be the last corner was the worst part, but as we'll come on to the sprint in a bit, there was quite a few areas at that point.
Yeah.
I suppose that was the disadvantage, that it was the closer to the actual raining, but when the rain was there, so I suppose there was more water still to come up at that point, so I suppose that maybe was why it was a little bit worse. But either way then, we'll actually go into Moto 3 now. But it was something that kind of affected that race quite a bit, and it was just worth mentioning beforehand to explain the whole thing. And immediately at the start of the race, it kind of reared its head. I don't know if it was particularly the wet patch that caused this incident, but even still, at the last corner, the fastest rider across the last 2 weekends, probably the whole season so far, really looked like he had the pace to maybe check out today. David Alonso takes the lead from Munoz pretty early on, and then crashes at the end of the first lap into the last corner. What do you think? Was it wet patch or just pushing the front a little bit too much? Because it did look like there was a bit of chatter going in there.
For me, it was definitely an Alonso fault. So the wet patch for me was somewhere at full lean in kind of the midpoint of the corner, because it was just as you maybe got a touch wide to kind of veer it off. People were just losing it really out of the blue, whereas he loses it similar to Martin, where like he's just getting his knee down and it's gone. There was so much chatter. So that for me is a Alonso mistake. Unfortunately, really, because he's kind of in the same boat for me as Aldeguer with the switch to Pirellis. The pace is amazing, but the race weekends aren't going to plan. So we've seen him already burn up his tyres a few times, a bit like Aldeguer has, and just some weekends where it just doesn't click with him yet. So it's like he's still trying to figure out the puzzle of Pirelli. And I think this weekend probably would have been his best weekend this season so far. And I think he probably knew that he needed to make maybe a small gap, and then he could probably control it, and then he wouldn't have to worry too much about the tyres. So he's probably just trying to break Munoz and into the last corner. It is a lot bumpier now. I don't know if this has been as bumpy in previous years. It seems worse this year. I'm not too sure. I didn't see anything being said by the riders, but I saw a few people. Obviously, the slow-mos, his crash. Now, Moto3 bikes are inherently stiff, so any bump will make a Moto3 bike look a bit ragged. But yeah, it was just one of those ones where he just probably, a lot of riders kind of give it 2 or 3 push laps, maybe get a second and a half, and then kind of manage. And that would have been the way to do it. But yeah, it's a small disappointment for him, especially with Holgado being injured. We'll obviously touch on him later, but it was just a bit of naivety in a way, because he didn't really need to. Again, his pace was so strong. He could have done the classic win at the slowest pace possible, and I don't think really the front guys could have matched him, even if he took it a bit easier. So yeah, still a rookie mistake, even though he's not a rookie. So yeah, bit of an interesting one for him to learn from.
Yeah, bit of a rookie error. I mean, to be fair, he is only his second season, so still pretty fresh.
Sophomore, I think they call it, don't they? That's second year.
Yeah, it's more of an American term, isn't it? But it seems to have creeped in a little bit. But either way, it was a bit of a silly mistake. I still actually am not 100% sure how he would have got on if he'd stayed on, because his pace was matching the leaders. So I don't know if maybe he actually did have the pace to pull away, or maybe he was a bit reticent after having the crash. I don't know, or backing off a little bit. But it was a decent recovery ride. I'm not sure exactly where did he get to. It was about 12th or something like that.
Well, yeah, he got to 12th, then it was about 2.5-3 seconds up the road with like a lap to go. So
there was
end of his charge.
But I feel like in the past we may have seen, if it was the Dunlop tyres, potentially we could have seen him get through more people. But
exactly,
I think he couldn't go too fast on the tyres, because obviously just destroys them. So I think he had to try and play a bit of a balancing game, and that's also what the leaders were doing as well. I mean, to be honest, not the most eventful race at the front, was it? It was pretty processional. I think Colin Veyer took the lead from Munoz, maybe lap 2, 3. Not exactly sure which lap it was, but that was pretty much it then from there. I mean, there was a bit of battling with, David Munoz. It's always going to be a bit of interest with the 2 MTA bikes for Yamanaka and Ortola. But they sort of settled down. Looked like no one wanted to go too wild to ruin their tyres, but it seemed like Veyer in particular was just pretty happy to hit the same lap times over and over again, whereas I think some of the others in the group were maybe dropping back. But this is sort of the I don't know, they always say Jerez is kind of like the first proper sort of weekend where they're all dialed in, they've tested here, they know this. Are we sort of now seeing maybe more the consequence of the tyres? I mean, we've seen it obviously a little bit throughout the first few rounds. Moto3 obviously is never going to have as much of a delta as the other classes, but in Moto3 in particular, did this race kind of play out a little bit differently because of the tyres? I feel like in seasons gone by, Munoz would have absolutely sent it at the first opportunity he got, but it seemed like he kind of had to stay there because he knew he'd ruin his tyre and drop back otherwise.
For me, the only thing that would change my mind is, obviously we'll touch on the sprint and all the action there, but you need to remember they haven't ridden the track since before the sprint. They see all the incidents in the sprint, and then they have to go race on that track. Now, of course, there was overnight, it was drying stuff, so you imagine it would dry up.
Not much scares them.
True, but for me, it felt like everyone was being so well behaved that I thought there was probably an overall thing that people are still thinking wet patches, because I think that was the whole kind of theme of the weekend for me, was that certain riders were probably taking a bit more risk on wet patches and getting bit, whereas other riders were playing it safe and getting better results. That's Fabio in the sprint, and again, we'll cover sprint in its own aspect later, but even the Moto 3, but I don't really think it was tyres. Yeah, it was as well, right? It's fair enough. Artola, Yamanaka, I still feel he's having a good season, but I don't think he's a front runner. I still think if we see a Philly, Foot, Holgado, and Alonso up the front, I think we see a different race. I think Wire doesn't have it so easy. I was quite surprised with Munoz. He was the surprise because he's usually kind of axe murderer at the front of the field and will go for anything. So I wondered today, was he just a bit pace limited because he seemed very calm and tidy behind, and he never actually made an attempt. So I was wondering, was he just sitting in there with Vire being able to stick with him, and again using his lightness compared to Vire, who's a bit bigger. So maybe that was part of the race as well, that we're probably seeing riders that aren't what I'd class as, maybe I'm being a bit harsh with Vire because he's had a good season, a very good rookie season, but he's not a multiple Grand Prix winner yet. So I still think that even in the last 5-6 laps he would. Well, he isn't as of now, yes, but I still don't class him as a Holgado or an Alonso, where you expect him to kind of been able to control a race as well as he did. So you still expect with Colin Vire that there was a bit more kind of nerves than you'd imagine a Holgado had in that position, especially with the likes of Munoz and probably Yamanaka behind him. And even Artola has been hit or miss this year for me. It was very good last year. Obviously got his victory. So again, the kind of group of riders that were in that battle today, I was kind of thinking it's going to be a bit of a different race. So they are probably felt themselves that they're all on for good results, and let's not kind of hunt ourselves, which is again not the Moto 3 way, as you said already. So, but I kind of put it all down to the fact that wet patches were such a big issue in the Motogp sprint that they were probably just a bit timid in some aspects, because you see, as soon as you touch when you're down, there is no saving it. So, and again, the fact that we saw so many crashes, I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to that question again: should Moto2 and Moto3 have a warm-up session?
100%.
They would have a much better idea of track conditions if that was the case. I think they really should. I think it's still really silly that they don't, because
so dangerous.
It's what, like, they only give 10 minutes to MotoGP. So if they give everyone 10 minutes, I think that's still a bit short. I think the 20-minute warm-ups that they used to have was probably the ideal. But they've done it for this fan thing, I guess, which is great experience for the fans at the track, of course. But they're not on the circuit, are they? I'm sure it's a pit lane thing, or not a pit lane thing, a paddock thing. So could they not have a session going on whilst that's happening? Or, again, literally just 20 minutes in the morning. It's not hard to find 20 minutes somewhere. Like just open up the track earlier, like by 20 minutes or so.
There's 100% a solution. Yeah, there's definitely a solution.
It's not like it's impossible to have a warm-up session. So I mean, even maybe give them, instead of having all of the stuff pre-race, like, just instead of having like the sighting lap, maybe give them have the sighting lap obviously, but give them maybe like a 5-minute, 10-minute warm-up session then or something. I don't know, but just there's got to be some sort of solution to that. But obviously, you made mention a few times there of Danny Holgado. We probably should sort of address. Obviously, we said he was injured. I think caused by a wet patch, right, in qualifying through turn 5, which was where it seemed to be really bad at turn 5 on Saturday. I think they did something to it overnight, didn't they? To make it better, because
I would hope.
It was such a fast corner, so dangerous to crash there. I mean, we saw, again, mentioning the sprint. I mean, I think this is going to be a bit of a recurring theme, sort of referencing that, because that's when these issues first really came to light. Because I guess that was the first session that was properly dry again, I guess. I mean, I suppose there was the qualifying for Moto2 and Moto3, but the first, like, the MotoGP qualifying was still wet. It's like they were still on wet tyres, so it's the first proper race session. And he got caught. Well, he didn't get caught out, to be fair. I don't think it's really a rider's fault if there's a bit of wet on the track that they can't see. Apparently from the bike, you literally can't see it at all. But pretty big crash. He looked to pick up the bike straight away, but then as he picked the bike up, he sort of fell then down in the gravel. Obviously, the pain hit him. And we don't think we were 100% sure if he would be able to ride, because it looked like maybe a sprain or something that would put him out. But he did manage to line up on the grid. Damage limitation, just sort of hanging in that second group, and as some of the riders from the front group sort of dropped back towards him, tried to sort of capitalise on that. But it was a decent ride from Holgado. Obviously, Rueda as well, one of the other contenders, was out of it. So yeah, it was a different race, because the top 3 guys just weren't there. Effectively, it was, which I guess is what allowed it to be sort of between Munoz and Vire, who apparently Munoz was up to 2nd place in the championship off the back of that, which is certainly interesting. I didn't realise he'd been that consistent over the first few rounds, but maybe he has turned a corner. Maybe he actually has sort of started to learn things a little bit.
Why is all age of 17?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still remember that first GP he turned up at when he was first old enough, and he was just sending it on everybody. It was crazy.
Yeah, and that feels so long ago now, even though it's only been what, a year and a bit, a year.
Yeah, well,
Time is mad. So yeah, he looked mature today, definitely. But again, was it because he was limited by pace? He was one of the riders from my memory that actually didn't seem to get on too well with the Pirellis. He liked the Dunlops because he didn't seem that quick in testing. But obviously, being at the front of his own GP today, definitely has found something over the first few rounds.
yeah. I mean, his teammate has kind of outshined, like in terms of pace, outshone him, and maybe there's been some setup revelation because
Yeah.
of that. But really, we probably should hats off to the race winner Colin Veidt because he just. I don't know whether you noticed this as much, but it just seemed like he rode that last lap very well because he had Munoz right behind him. But it wasn't even that he had to defend everywhere. He just kind of placed the bike in the right positions, carried the speed, and then into that last corner, he just had time in hand through the previous two right-handers and was just able to stretch the gap and just stop the dive bomb from even happening. So he didn't even have to go over the defensive, didn't even give the chance for Munoz to even go through. Like, it was one of those things where the entire race he was just hitting his marks every single time, and he didn't do anything different on the last lap either, which really shows a sign of someone that feels quite confident, and it's quite a mature thing to do because it's very easy to overly defend or not defend enough. I mean, one of the most experienced Moto3 riders we ever had was Sasaki. Obviously, he's got to Moto2 now, but he was often caught foul by either defending too much or not defending enough. He could never quite find that balance, but it seemed like on this occasion that his teammate from last year, Vaya, actually managed to pretty much get it to perfection. Now, whether it'd be different if you had the likes of David Alonso there, probably would have been, but I mean, if you're going to defend from anyone, so Munoz is going to probably be one of the hardest ones to do it from.
Yeah, it was the last lap was, again, you already mentioned, it was pretty special for me because he was doing, was it 51s they were doing? It was like a 51.4, I think, was that the lap time?
I don't know exactly, to be honest, but
Whatever the lap time was, they were doing something. It might have been a 41. I'm trying to think now. Were they
yeah,
50 sounds too much.
50 does sound too much.
Yeah, it was a 36.7 is what marked it in like the penultimate lap. 36.4 is
they're not going to be
the
that
fastest
far
new
off
all.
of the circuit, are
So
they?
yeah, so I think he was doing 41.5s like literally the laps, like 7 or 8 laps, and then the last lap he takes 3/10 off and does a 41.2 as fast as the race. That's just class. That is proper Lorenzo-esque because like I think his whole race spread was only like 4, maybe 5/10 from fastest to slowest lap. He was absolutely just in control of the race. And again, maybe when you know you have someone behind you who's probably not race sharp is probably not the right word, but probably not as good overall. You'd imagine Munoz is great at always being in the battle, but in terms of trying to stretch a race or trying to manage at the front, that's somewhere still I still just question his ability and his kind of temperament. Does he have that? Danny Holgado was very good at it, for example. But back to Vare, he just seemed to be able to be so much in control. And again, I was watching thinking, is that his pace? Is that where he's happy to go at? But he just seemed that he was like, well, I can do this lap. I'm not being passed. I don't need to win the race any quicker. Winning at the slowest pace possible. Something I kind of already accused Alonso of being kind of quite silly for not trying to do. But yeah, it was a perfect good race for him. And again, he's starting to become maybe a bit of a title contender in the class if he can kind of keep this form up.
So on to Moto 2 then, and the weekend got off to not a very good start for a rider that really is one of the championship contenders, has been building up momentum so far this season, Aaron Canet. Big crash at turn 8, and it looked very apparent immediately. I mean, he tumbled through the gravel. It's a fast corner, you don't want to crash there, but it looked very immediate as he tumbled through that he was injured. He was immediately sort of checking his ankle. Turns out he's fractured his ankle, and that was him out for the rest of the weekend. So we do wish Canet a speedy recovery, but that's kind of changed the complexion of the championship a little bit. I mean, I know it's kind of been a little bit hit and miss so far at the start of the season, but he finally got his first win. You know, he's with the team where I think he is probably a little bit more comfortable here. He seems to like these Pirelli tyres, seems to get a bit more feeling from them. So he's definitely going to be a championship contender, but this potentially, I mean, depends on whether he can be back for the next round. And ankle is a bit dodgy, so maybe he'll miss Le Mans as well, not too sure. But this could be the end of his title campaign already, or at least a big hit to it, because that's 25 points that he's lost today.
Yeah, he's out of it for me, unfortunately. It was always going to be tough against Aldeguer. No matter how well even if he made a step this year with the Pirellis and kind of figured out the class a bit more, got that first win, get that off the back. Even if all that went his way, I'd still wouldn't put him as my favorite over Aldeguer. So the fact that he's broken his ankle or fractured the ankle, sorry, for me, he'll turn up at Le Mans, do Friday, and then pull out a GP. I don't think he'll be. I'd be surprised. It was a nasty crash, very fast into turn 8. And it just, whatever way he kind of gets off the bike, he kind of goes into the gravel at a weird angle and just kind of gets thrown around. And fortunately, that's how things get broken. So it's it's unfortunate because he's been having a better season. He looks better on these Pirellis. He's making probably less mistakes. He's always been a crasher, and again, unfortunately, we're talking about a crasher. He's got injured, but for the most part, this year I do think he's after making a bit of a step. So it's a shame to see him injured because nearly every season he's been 1 or 2. I think he's picked up some sort of injury, so
Yeah.
it's just unfortunate. And again, turn 8, it's such a fast entry. It's one of those corners where you really go in at high speed and try and scrub the speed off at angle. So it's just unfortunate, really, that probably a small mistake, penalty didn't fit the crime kind of situation. So yeah, we do just kind of wish him best of luck and hope to see him back on his bike soon.
Yeah, hopefully Aaron does get back quick, but not too soon, of course. Want to make sure that he does give himself time to recover because, again, that is definitely one of those injuries that's easy to aggravate. And Le Mans coming up next, I mean, a few changes of direction there. It's not going to be the easiest track, I don't think, it's, it's quite a tight little circuit. It's not one of those circuits that's going to be. I mean, it's likely to rain. That would, I suppose, take off some of the physical stress, but yeah, I don't want him to rush back too quickly. So that was one crasher before the race even started. But once we got into the race, another rider who was supposed to really be a championship contender going into the season, Jake Dixon, had another retirement. Well, actually, I think he did get back on, didn't he? But another crash out of a race, and that is 0 points from 4 rounds for Jake. Obviously, he had the terrible accident at Qatar in practice, was ruled out of that race, and therefore the not the Circuit of the Americas, Portimao as well.
Portimao.
Then he actually come back from injury in the Circuit of the Americas, had a promising start to the race, crashed out of a decent position, and I think that adequately describes this weekend as well. Actually qualified very well, considering I think he got a bit lucky with the rain, really, that kind of messed the conditions around. I think helped sort of suited him a little bit more, and decent start to the race as well. Obviously, was slowly fading back because the pace wasn't quite there, but unfortunately, a crash at turn 13. Down he went, and another 0 points. Potentially championship over, potentially question marks over his future as well. Obviously, there was sort of rumours he could end up in MotoGP during last season when he was on that run of form, doing really well. Obviously, that didn't quite come together with the sort of shortage of seats in that class. But maybe with KTM making another team, was his name back in the hat if he had another good season this year? Obviously, they really want to have a British rider in MotoGP as well. But no points from the first 4 races isn't the best way to start it. I suppose the only thing that really is going in his favour, well, the only 2 things really, is that his teammate is also not doing very well, and everybody that swapped to the WP suspension seems to be struggling, and he was head and shoulders quicker than the rest of those guys, but it doesn't really matter how quick you are if you're not scoring the points on the Sundays at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one for Jake, really, because it's probably the WP and the Pirelli has been a bit of a mix where I know the team, and especially anyone who's been on the kind of KTM brands, they were like, right, new tyres, we might as well take the plunge now and take the hit now. But Jake, last year, wins, good chance at a decent run in championship, ends up 4th, obviously, because Aldeir goes on an amazing run towards the end. But really, to be honest, for me, he was the 3rd best in champion last year. Take out the extreme run of form that Aldeir went on towards the end to kind of rack up silly points, and where Jake just started to misfire. I would have put him 3rd in the world last year, which is no mean feat. So,
If Lopez doesn't take him out, he's 3rd in the world, kind of thing, So
yeah, exactly, we're splitting hairs over how he didn't end up 3rd in the world. Pedro's moved up, and another rider this year struggling is gone out of P2. So that leaves him probably as one of the favourites alongside Aldeguer for the title. And now we're sitting here talking about how he's yet to score points. and obviously the Qatar race and the injury was, or the Qatar race weekend I should say, and the injury was unfortunate as that was out of his control. So that was already a bad start. But the fact, again, a small mistake in Texas, easily done. And again, this weekend I'm going to put down to a wet patch because it's a carbon copy crash of the other 7 or 8 riders that crashed in this race. It looks ever so slightly wide. And that was enough to just lose the front, and that was his race over then, because you're really not going to recover in Moto2 with the Pirellis these days. And we talked about how Alonso didn't kind of fight back even though we thought he had pace. The Pirellis, you can't kind of go on a run if you need to, so it's unfortunate if you have a small mistake like this. And again, we're talking about very minute little mistakes here because he's just slightly offline, and unfortunately that has been the end of his race again. And again, qualifying in the weather you'd mentioned, that definitely suited him. The wet weather, again, he's decent in the mixed conditions, so he's probably further up the grid than he should have been, and he probably finishes 6th, 7th today if it doesn't tip off at the last corner, which on paper sounds like a poor result. But again, the WP suspension is such a big jump for them. It's going to take on a long time, and I think it's just come at the worst possible time for Jake, because I think with the GP class maybe looking for some other nationalities in American, maybe a Briton in the class, I think he's really in line for that seat if it appears. And again, I was just thinking as you were kind of giving the intro part there to Dixon, with Yamaha really banging after a second team in GP, he would be very good fit for a second tier Yamaha team if they get a Pramac Yamaha or a Gresini Yamaha, as we're kind of hearing of late. So if there is 4 Yamahas on the grid next year, you would think that maybe Jake could be on bike 3 and 4, we could say. So it would be it would have been kind of a perfect fairy tale. Obviously he's had the race at Silverstone on the Petronas Yamaha back in 21 when he was filling in. So again, he has the kind of connection there with Yamaha, so it wouldn't be completely out of the blue to see him get up, but it just hasn't gone his way this year so far. And again, a lot of it's been out of his hands. For me, the crash in Qatar is a bit of a weird one. I don't know if that was right or error as much as just the bike not being kind of in the window for him. Texas is all mistaken. Again, a wet patch here. It's like we said, and we're going to say for the whole podcast, it's not really on the rider really. When you're going probably apex there about 60 miles an hour, so you're coming in probably 100 and 110 as you're kind of getting down into that corner. So to try and spot a small little patch of slightly different colour tarmac and avoid it is near impossible. So I'm going to throw back to you though on the question of the future, because I know, to being British and a fellow British rider, what do you expect for next year from him? Because I just get the impression that he's not going to stay in Moto too much longer. If he doesn't go up, he'll probably go to Superbikes. And I think he really does want a GP1. And to be honest, as a British rider, I think he's not that far off being deservedly in the class. So, back to you on kind of whether he'll be there next year or not.
Yeah, I mean, his season last year really helped his chances for a MotoGP seat, because he proved that he was one of the better riders in Moto2, because it was only really the 2 exceptional talents ahead of him, and obviously Arbolino as well, which is not me slighting Arbolino, but I'm just saying that these 2 sort of once in a generation talents, Aldeguer and Acosta, which I guess once in a generation doesn't really work when there's 2 of them, but you know what I mean. There's the 2,
a handful of generations.
Yeah, exactly. You get the few. It's the aliens of the generation, I guess. But,
1%.
Yeah, there you go. That's the 1%.
The Lemac Club.
Yeah, I was about to say the same joke, but there you go. So we've got the 2 Lemac riders, and then we've got obviously Tony Arbolino as well. Apologies if you don't get the reference, but anyway, let's not derail it any further. But either way, it helped him out because he showed that he could be there. He had the suit for the awards ceremony. Let's put it that way. That's how close he was to finishing in the top 3 in the world. He'd got it. So
quite sad.
Yeah, it's because it went down to the final day, didn't it? So he was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know about the suit. Obviously, I didn't know about the.
Yeah, I think supposedly anyway. But again, bit of a tangent. So that obviously helped his kind of future there. This start of the season's not been great, but at the end of the day, he's not scored so far. It's not really like anybody else on WP has scored much at all. Again, Guevara, his teammates, really underperforming, because I don't know, is it debatable whether it's better to crash out of 5th a couple of times than to be constantly like 20th? Maybe so, because I suppose, yes, that they're at least finishing, but you can probably stop the crashes. And like we say, they were very unfortunate, and today it was probably a wet patch. So, yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying, that I can't see him sticking in Moto2 for a long. I don't think he's going to do a Sam Lowes and stick in Moto2 for like over a decade kind of thing, or about a decade, I suppose it was, because he had the season out, didn't he, as well? So I think that was 9 seasons in Moto2 that Sam Lowes did. Can't see Dixon doing that many, although he's not far off. Well, I say he's not far off that. You'd only have to do a few more seasons, I think, to get somewhere near that. But
Is he 5 years now in? He came in 19, didn't he, on the KTM?
yeah,
Am I remembering that
yeah,
right?
it was with Aspar actually the first time, wasn't it? And then he went off to Petronas for a couple of years, and then went back to Aspar. But yeah, it's yeah, I can't see him staying too much longer. I can't see the team particularly getting rid of him because again, like I said, he's outperforming his teammate, and they seem to like him because they obviously wanted him back. I mean, they took the chance on him in the first place, which was
True.
it was always very much a surprise to see the Aspar team taking a punt on a BSB rider, because it's not like, you know, they usually bring that they very much bring the talent through kind of team. They've got teams going all the way down to the sort of the junior GP and even below that. I think they got like a European Talent Cup kind of team, or like Aspar really go grassroots. I mean, we've seen them, like Arenas came through that system, and obviously we've seen Guevara come through that system. Garcia sort of came through that system. So it is those really top level riders. So it was strange to see that punt in the first place. So I don't think he will get sacked, especially if he can continue to perform. But yeah, I feel like he's not gonna. He wants the GP seat. He's not here to be a Moto2 rider. He's not sort of happy just doing that for the career. It's just because he wants to try to get to MotoGP. So I don't know. It depends how the rest of the season goes, I suppose. MotoGP, bit of a closed shop at the minute because they're not allowing the extra KTM teams. So who knows? I can't see him being a MotoGP next year, and then I suppose we'll see what happens in the Moto2 season. But
Could you see him on a satellite Yamaha if that team does come to isn't a dream anymore, we'll say?
I could see it because, like you say, he already had the Yamaha connection. I suppose that was through Petronas more that he got that opportunity. But he's also friends with Fabio Quartararo, which I know doesn't really mean much, but in a way it does, because if you have one of the most important people on side with you, obviously that's going to be very good. I'm sure they'll get some sort of money for having Dixon as well, because that's, if you don't know, that's how it works with when there's the nationalities that don't really have that many riders in the class, or don't have any riders in the class. I think Dorna do put some money into the team to help them out, or pay them X amount, or sort of allow more of a diverse field. So I imagine the same thing would happen for Joe Roberts, for example, if he was to get the opportunity. So yeah, I could see him on that if that comes to fruition, but it's all up in the air at the moment because obviously we don't know if that satellite Yamaha team is going to happen and who's going to have it. So basically, to cut a long story short, I agree with you that I can't see him sticking around in Moto2 forever. It's MotoGP or bust for Jake, I think. He's not going to stick around in Moto2 as long as Sam did, for example.
I always feel like Sam tried to get his way back into GP and then had a couple of years of kind of wilderness where I don't know what he wanted, and he was kind of a top guy but not top enough to do anything special to get back out of the class, and kind of got trapped a small bit there. I just don't see Jake doing that. I think in 18 months to 2 years we could see him on a very high end Superbike contract. But I know that he's done all this hard work and he's really tried hard to get into GP, so I still think he thinks himself that there's another couple of years trying of it before maybe going and signing a nice LT Superbike contract. So yeah, we'll see. Again, the big thing for me isn't anything on to Jake. I think Jake at the moment is in probably a purple patch of his career. I think it's all about the WP suspension, because we've seen multiple race winners like Vietti also seemingly struggle in the IR team, which is when I think we both saw that kind of signing for this year, we thought, brilliant, we're going to really see the maximum of Vietti and we're going to really see the potential of him, because that IO team just seems to get the most out of the riders kind of 9 out of 9 times really for them. So it's a real interesting proposition there, but unfortunately that's also seemingly struggling. And again, you have to put it on suspension. It's such a massive change to what's almost been a set class for the last 7-8 years. So it'll come, but it might be at the cost of a big opportunity in his career, especially when the likes of Joe Roberts seems to be, after getting the kind of the rub of the green, I suppose, maybe with the class, where he's now performing and looking like stars are aligning, pardon the pun, for him to move up to GP. So yeah, I think similar could happen for Jake, but at the moment it's just being hindered by the equipment in a way.
Yeah, I mean, as it shows, all these rumours sort of happening with, like I say, with Joe Roberts, you only need a run of a good few races, and suddenly your name's in there.
Exactly.
The same thing happened with Arbolino last year. He had a good run of races, and all of a sudden his name was in the hat. Didn't seem to work out, and then he had a pretty poor into the season, really, didn't he? So yeah, it's you just never know with these sort of rider lineups and how things are going to go. But of course, Jake obviously had the crash at turn 13. He was not anywhere close to being the only one there. I couldn't tell you everybody that crashed at that corner. There were so many.
There was 8. Try and
There was
guess them.
8. Well, Artigas was one, right? Because his bike literally went into
One.
the pit wall.
Yeah, that was
So,
one.
obviously Jake, unless you would
2.
have counted him. Yeah, 2. Did a Screech go down there as well?
3.
Yeah, I remember 2 of the Ford bikes went down. Who else went down there? No, he was in Moto 3. I was thinking Joel Esteban for a minute then, but he did go down there. He just was in there.
3.5.
Yeah.
I'll give you a hint. Algarve's teammate.
Oh yeah, Lopez fell off there, didn't he? Yep.
2 teammates both crashed in the same corner. One's a rookie and Brazilian. To give you a hint, that'll bring it up to 6.
Foggia and Moreira, yep, both crashed
6. I
Zonta
believe Binder crashed there.
Yeah, Binder crashed, didn't he?
And I believe Baltus was 8.
I knew an RW went down, but I didn't think it was Zonta because Zonta had I don't know what happened.
He got a
with that.
penalty.
He got a penalty because someone hit him at the back. There must be more to that.
Yeah, there had to be because I was
There's
thinking the same.
there's no way that like he just got a penalty because Senna hit him at the back. He must have been joining from off track or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's.
I wonder did he like dive on and run wide, square him off, and then clip him on the way back through or something. But again, that's all kind of speculation because there was very little camera average.
Yeah, they showed a bit of an accident, and then we're like, oh, he's got a penalty. It's like, well, do you not want to show us some more angles? Like, but yeah. Anyway, so there you go. Then that's your 8 that crashed there. That's for one corner. That corner always catches people out anyway, even when it's not got the wet patch. I mean, the greasiness is bad there. I mean, I remember actually, I'm pretty sure that Dixon crashed there a couple of years ago trying to pass like Aldeguer. So
yeah, he's battling some top riders. Remember that was the comment.
Yeah, that's I remember that was it. Yeah, that was the excuse, wasn't it?
He's not he's crashing while battling the top guys, which is one of the weirdest kind of bigging up a rider I've heard. But yeah,
there you go. But that was a very treacherous one. Obviously, we said in Moto 3 already, so I don't know if there's really that much more to say about it. But the wet patch seemed to be striking there, and I think the MotoGP riders took heed of that. Because that seemed to be the only really bad corner in Moto 2. I didn't really see many other crashes anywhere else. I think was there a crash at turn 8? I think someone might have gone down there. Well, it was almost reminiscent of one of those greasy track races because there was quite a few going down.
Yeah, it was still a typical first week back in Spain. Lots of crashes in
We haven't
Moto
really
2
seen
races
that so far this season. I don't think, but it definitely was.
Pirellis have changed that a lot, but again, this weekend I think toppled with difficult conditions and a bit of water, and again, just a difficult track overall. We know that Red is so bloody old. The track surface is quite finely worn away, so it is a bit of a glossy effect track. So it's no matter what the conditions are, it's never going to be the highest performing one. So a bit of a interesting track in that kind of facet.
Yes, it's one of those classic old circuits. I mean, it's been resurfaced a few times, but I think sometimes there is underlying issues with these tracks sometimes. But enough about the actual track surface and the turn 13 crashes and free practice. We actually may as well talk about the guys at the front of the race. So Firmin Aldeguer was on pole position for the first time this season. Also took the win for the first time this season. Kind of a weekend that's come together for him at last because he's clearly been the fastest so far over the first 3 rounds of the season. And just weird things seem to happen to him in the races where whether he got rammed wide, whether his teammate was being really aggressive with him, that sort of forced him to have to come back through the pack and use his tyre. But on this occasion, he didn't actually quite like to flag it because he had to obviously hunt down Manu Gonzalez, and they had a bit of a scrap. Gonzalez did try and hang on, bless him, in the stadium section, but just didn't quite work out for him. And then once he got to the front, he slowly eased the gap away. And then I think towards the end, Gonzalez sort of maybe ran out of tyre, and Aldeguer was able to sort of pull away even more. So kind of shown that Aldeguer can manage his tyres, because that was obviously a bit of a question mark in the first few races. Just seems like the way those races played out didn't really work for him. Whereas he was at the front from the beginning. Yes, he wasn't actually in first place, but he was out in the top three the entire race, and that's just not happened so far this season. And I think it's finally come together from him. And I kind of get the Costa vibes from last year. You know how to start with Arbolino beat him a couple of times, then he crashed at Le Mans and he was sort of down by like a race win's worth. This is the start of the building. He's going to catch up to Joe Roberts and Garcia in front, slowly chip away the points, and then maybe just start to build out a bit of a gap. That's the kind of impression that I get now from that performance.
Yeah, coming into the year, take out all the madness with the Pirelli switch and stuff. Everyone was saying that it's a nailed on championship for Aldeguer. Very early on, he gets his Ducati contract, so that was like, well, he has no reason why he can't go on and win the title now because there's the distraction that wasn't taken away. There's there was a big group of people last year thought that the fact that Arbolino just got his head turned slightly towards the kind of first quarter of the season when the Pramac rumours came around, because pretty much when they started surfacing, his performance went down and he never really regained it. And to be honest, he hasn't since, which is a bit of a shame really, because we all kind of,
the whole team has gone off the cliff.
Yeah, it's a weird one like that.
And I wonder if some of the personnel have gone over to Superbike. I'm not sure exactly what's
that could be a good
there.
shout actually. In fairness, yeah, that's that, because again, they'd absolutely adore Sam Lowe's, and again, they probably, with a new team, they probably want to give Sam everything they can kind of give, and I'd imagine Sam would have probably taken a couple of maybe engineers or whatever. So, and again, they've done quite well in Superbike, so that actually kind of backs up that point even more really. So yeah, that's probably a good shout. And again, Salach in Moto 2, it feels that he may be too big for that bike. I think Salach is probably a better fitter on like a Superbike, kind of like Van der Mark. So I think he will struggle in that class. He'll always kind of show his speed and stuff, but over all season, I think he's going to struggle. But back to Aldeguer, we were expecting this race weekend eventually. Like you mentioned, there's always been something so far this season that stopped him. And yeah, he's finally clicked into gear when he got the lead. In fairness, Manuel Gonzalez was amazing on the brakes into, was it turn 6?
Yeah, he really
kept overtaking. Like
the
amount of times he managed to do it was really impressive. So again, in fairness to him, it was really, really just impressive what he was able to do, to be able to hold him that far, because he held it up. Like, because really what should have happened is Aldeguer should have passed him once, and that should have been that. He should have kind of just checked out, put his head down for 2 laps, built the second gap, and then kind of managed it. Whereas Manu made a nice race of it. So in fairness to him, kind of props him for that he actually was able to keep him somewhat honest for a few laps and again kind of fight back, because coming into the race, everyone kind of was thinking Aldeguer is going to run away with this one. It's going to be a nice easy win for him, and it was nice to see someone actually try and actually put a fight up against him. And Fairness did a very stellar job for the few laps he could, and then probably maybe actually kind of backfired on later in the race, because it looked like he might have used a slight a bit too much tyre in that kind of little fight with Aldeguer, because he has issues later in the race then. But to finish up Aldeguer, it's a very similar to Acosta last year. We're kind of expecting him to go on a bit of run, and you did mention there the similarities to how last year started for Pedro, and he kind of had to come back, whereas I think already Aldeguer is in a better position this year. I don't think he's as far off. I don't think there was someone this year who started as well, because like you look at the moment it's Joe Roberts. In fairness, he started quite well, but I still think that I've yet to see enough from Joe to think that he can go on a full season campaign run, that he'll actually be able to do what Arbolino kind of did last year, where he was able to be quick pretty much everywhere. So I still have question marks over pretty much everyone ahead of Aldeguer, whether they can actually stay ahead of him. So I think Aldeguer is definitely in a prime position to pull this one back and probably lead going to Kazakhstan or somewhere like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not that far behind, is he, really? I imagine.
Exactly.
Is he third in the championship or second? I think he must be
I
one
will
of the two.
find out, because I have the results here in front of me.
But, yeah. I mean, you mentioned Joe Roberts there. Obviously, Joe Roberts is now the championship leader. I think that's worth talking about because, and well, of course it's worth talking about. He's the championship leader and he's been doing really well. But Qatar, he had fantastic pace in practice, seemed to just disappear in the race, but I feel like he must have just finished fairly well in that race and we kind of didn't notice it as much. He must have finished sort of back end of the
Finished like 6th. I think I remember him being there, but
yeah, he was
special.
there or thereabouts. And then he's been on the podium in the last 3 races, which obviously is by far the best run he's had in his career. And it's one of those old school Moto2 things. We've seen it before with I remember Augusto Fernandez in like 2019, not the actual season he won it, but he was just kind of he was pretty consistent. He went on a bit of a run, I think, of a couple of race wins, but he was in the championship fight with like Alex Marquez that year. Obviously, Tom Luthi was always the king of being, up there every weekend until they changed the front tyre, obviously, and ended his career. But yeah, it was it's Joe Roberts, like, he's been very, very impressive, especially with all the pressure on him. And I don't think anyone expected it at all. I mean, he looked good in testing, but he's looked good in testing before, and it's not really worked out. And he was obviously better with American racing, I think, than he ever was with Ital Trans, despite the fact obviously he got the win at a couple of good results, but never really job with that team. Seemingly comes back to American racing. I expected like some podiums at some point, but this run of form, first American to lead the championship since Hayden, which is crazy to think about. Like, I mean, that was so long ago, nearly 20 years ago.
It's crazy in one sense, but then the more you think about it, the more you think, well, of course, there has been no one. You think of Speeds, but like Speeds was, anytime he had the opportunity, like the factory Yamaha years, he was really hot and cold. So
Lorenzo and
that never really
is miles at the road.
That's it. Like Lorenzo, one of them would lead out of Qatar, and that would be it nearly till the end of the year. So, yeah. So the fact that it's a shame that it's been that long, but also it's not a surprise to me anyway.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I don't know if you've got up the standings for this yet. But,
he's 15 points off.
Yeah,
the
so
lead in third position.
Points off. So within the next couple of rounds, I mean, even if Roberts is finishing on the podium, he could
leave Le Mans championship leader. Like, it's not out of the possibility.
It's not a question, but hopefully Roberts can make a bit of a race of it. I'm sure we'd love that, to see a more competitive season, and Sergio Garcia as well. I mean, it's not like he was nowhere this weekend. He was still fourth, I think, right? So it wasn't like he was a million miles behind. I mean, also, actually, not on the notes at all, but where did Agora come from? Because I just saw him cross the line in like fifth. I was like, where did he come from? Because he qualified like 17th or something. And he was just slowly goes his way through. Agora just... Maybe
King
another ride that's a bit, not disappointing, but you wouldn't have expected him to be being outperformed by Garcia. But
definitely, yeah. You would have thought he would have been like a team leader going into
They've actually been close, even though the points I don't think suggest it. But it's very strange to see, that's for sure.
Yeah, pretty much with the Agora, it seems like he just doesn't have that one lap pace. Really, for me, it's the big thing for me is that he seems just overall to be probably better on his tires. I think he just seems to be very good on tires, and that's probably why it gets him into these positions. Because I think that if we went back and looked at the results, I'd say his team has probably outqualified him every race so far, and that's probably why he has the position in a championship. Whereas we're talking about Iagoro doing these one-off races. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame because I'm quite fond of Iagoro and what he can do, but last couple of years he's just seemingly made a couple of bad decisions, and I think he's probably on the verge of making another bad decision going up to GP with Honda. So
I don't think it's really going to be his decision, is it? I don't think he can keep saying
exactly. I think he's going to be kind of forced into that, and again, that's going to be unfortunate in a way because, like, that Honda's gotten worse somehow.
Yeah, it has. That's the thing. It's lost the actual good
crazy
parts.
Yeah, so now that Honda is just, it's like a CRT bike these days, to be brutally honest. It's just so far off in every aspect. So, again, and then what'll happen is he'll just lose a couple of years of his career, and he'll probably bounce back in like Superbikes and do something special there. It's a shame because we need, again, we've talked in this podcast, I'll kind of touch on Joe Roberts in a second. We talked about the Briton, Jake Dixon. We need these other nationalities, not just your Spanish and your Italian in GP, and it'd be really good to see these other nationalities up there. And unfortunately, it just looks like Igor will probably get there, but probably won't get the ride he deserves. And again, it'll be quite hard for him to probably get some other good ride in GP if he goes up to Honda and kind of is a bit of a flop in a way. So, it's a bit disappointing really, because when he signed for them, I was like, oh, it's kind of maybe a sideways, even backward step in a way, and then going up to Honda, he's going to have a couple of rough years, I thought, and he showed promise this year, but it's kind of good race pace and coming through a pack, which is very good, but we're not seeing any of it. We kind of just see him on a result like, oh, he finished X today, and he did well to get there, like, but he shouldn't have been qualified 18th or wherever he qualified in the first race. Is kind of the way I look at it. But to kind of finish up with just the Joe Roberts thing, everyone's a fan of Joe Roberts. Everyone loves him. He's just such a charismatic guy. Everybody wants to see him do well, and I think he's probably, we've kind of mentioned this year a couple of times riders who've benefited from the Pirelli swap and people who have probably suffered. I think he's massively in favour. I think he's a rider that has probably very good feel, and now that he's more feel with these Pirellis, he can do a lot better because he really. Somebody on board say he was so much chatter and the bike was moving, and I was like, oh my god, into turn one he'd gained so much it was making me wince on board, but he just looked like he had it all under control. So in fairness to him, long may it last. I hope it can continue because we've seen flashes from Joe before and then he goes missing again, and then small injury here and the form goes away, and then he's 12th to every weekend again, and we're kind of not really bigging him up with Cup 2 GP. So hopefully he can continue this form, and yeah, let's kind of hope to see. We probably will have him in the future in GP because the Liberty media and the Trackhouse are really on his side of getting him into GP, so that's probably going to be on Aprilia soon for him. So let's hope he can keep his form, because I'd like to see him take this form into GP and then become someone in GP and not just another rider that's there because of his nationality to make up the nationalities, for example.
Yeah, I mean, he said it himself that he likes the Pirellis. He said it in the interview that he did with the TNT after the race, saying that he really likes how they feel. I mean, he was just turning underneath people as well, wasn't he? He's looked so confident and so good, which is really good to see. And yeah, I completely agree. It'd be nice for him to make himself in like that. Like, don't want him to be like the Logan Sargent of MotoGP. You know, he's
exactly.
just because he's American and nothing else. I mean, I think he's shown more promise than he ever did in the lower formula categories. But you know, I'd love to see him. Well, to be honest, what round do you think it's going to get announced that he's riding for Trackhouse? I think that's more the question at this point. I don't know, but
I could see him having a very good Mugello and then it being penciled in that he's
actually
agreed a contract
because of the Aprilia side. So,
and he's also very good at Mugello. He's gotten P2 there before as well in years gone by.
That was the year that Acosta was that 22 when Acosta won it, and he was second behind him.
Could have been last year. To be honest, it all blurs in.
Yeah.
Since COVID, it's all been one long season for me.
Yeah, I remember when he won at Portimao a couple of rounds ago. That was crazy when they all crashed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how he's leading the championship.
Everybody fell off. No, it's it'd be good to see Joe in MotoGP, and I think if he can just keep this form up for a couple more rounds, I think he'll have that one secured. I mean, I suppose the two guys in that team currently actually had a bit of a better race today, maybe trying to save their careers, but maybe it's a little bit too late for one of them. Probably going to be. I'd be very surprised if we didn't see Joe Roberts lining up in those American colours on the grid next year. But another rider who's had a much better season. Well, I suppose not much better. Well, yeah, I suppose it's much better than his previous seasons. That's Manu Gonzalez. Obviously, showed some signs of brilliance last year on the Mastercamp team, and we said quite a few times on the podcast that we thought he could do better in a better team. And over these first few rounds, he's definitely shown that, and he's shown that sort of fire and desire. Because in the past, he dropped back towards the end of races with tyres, which. I don't know if it's necessarily tyres, but you drop back at the end of races, and you're thinking they're swapping to these tyres that are really fragile. It's going to potentially be even worse, but it kind of showed that maybe it was the team and the setup potentially, because yes, he struggled a little bit with tyre today, but I think that was because he tried to race for the win, which you can't really blame him for doing. And it wasn't like he was miles off, it was just more that Joe Roberts had more tyre than him at the end. I don't think he was getting caught by the other guys behind, so it wasn't a massive issue there. I don't think he was in as much trouble as Garcia further backwards, for example. He looked like he was struggling quite a lot, even with quite a few laps to go when Joe Roberts caught him. So, yeah, Manu Gonzalez looked very impressive in testing. Was he on pole position at one of the rounds earlier on the year? Was it Portimao? He was on pole.
Portimao, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't think this is his first podium of the year, is it? I think he was. It might be, actually.
Was he on the podium in Portugal?
He might have been. Yeah, he was, wasn't he? Because it was him and Joe Roberts, wasn't it, on the podium with Canet, wasn't it? So yeah, another podium, and yeah, really, I mean, he could be potentially championship contender because again, he's got to be up there. Pretty consistent results so far. I think Qatar was a bit of a flop for him, but that was the case for a lot of riders. So I don't think it's really. I mean, Qatar seems like a very strange race now when you think about it. It was Barry Bolsus trying to go for the win there. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't see that happening again at another round this season now. It seems to have sort of settled down into normality a lot more. Now that they're sort of getting their heads around it a bit more, you see the same riders at the front week in, week out, rather than just sort of a bit of chaos that we saw in those opening couple of rounds.
Yeah. To start with Manu, again, I think we both rated him quite a lot last year.
Yeah.
We've always just felt that just slightly not in a good enough team and just missing something to be a consistent podium. Because how long was it that he was like finishing fourth every week and he just couldn't better that? And
kept being fifth, didn't he? That's what it was.
Was it fifth? Yeah, I knew there was like a certain result that he'd be leading the race and he didn't somehow end up like dropping back towards the end. So it's just overall really, really enjoyable to see him up there again. Slightly better team, just a bit more kind of well-oiled machine going on, and so overall really he's just made a step with the Pirellis. Obviously you mentioned Qatar, which Qatar is just Qatar. It's a weird round. Like a Qatar from any season and just look at the result and you go, oh, yeah, that was not how the season played out.
Nagashima, world champion.
Yeah, exactly. Digia
Baldassari.
Yeah, Baldassari, Digia, Nagashima, go on, so many more really, but we'll be here all night because just Qatar always throws up these one-off rides somehow. But he has been building quite strong, and again today he went head-to-head with arguably the prime rider in this class at the moment. So in fairness to him, he did a very stellar job, and I think he'll probably be a future Moto2 champion if he stays in the class another couple of years. He's only obviously been around a couple of years, so again, if you see Aldeguer, the likes of Aldeguer going up next year, you could see maybe him kind of taking the mantle of the rider to beat in that class, because he is undoubtedly one of the most talented riders in there, and again in a better team now, and again just give him a year on the Pirellis to kind of settle himself, and I think he could be definitely a title contender. And again this year we say title contender, I think maybe a dark horse. He'll probably be similar to Elation 2022 where he was kind of always just thereabouts. Yeah. So that's probably what I kind of see Manu doing something similar to that, maybe winning a couple of races here and there, and probably picking up the pieces of other people's mistakes, because he doesn't seem to make many himself. He seems quite good in that sense. So yeah, fairness to him, he's done really well. And again, I was really happy to see that he's got his move to Grassini, and it's definitely paying off because he's having a really good week this weekend, obviously, and just overall a good 2024 from him, fairness.
So on to MotoGP now, and something that we've been referencing a lot throughout the episode so far is the sprint. So we probably won't spend too much time on it, but it was chaotic, but it was one of those things. It wasn't chaotic because the racing was good. It was because all of a sudden they come round with a few laps to go and everyone just starts crashing. Don't know if did the track temperature change slightly and it seemed to bring the water through the circuit a bit more, but this is where the damp patch situation really became apparent. I mean, we had it in the other sessions, but at that point it hadn't been that long since the track was wet, so it's kind of like, oh, like fair enough. They're maybe just hitting the odd wet patch that hasn't quite evaporated. It wasn't such a weird thing. But at this point, track was bone dry. You'd had 2 dry qualifying sessions, in fact 4 dry qualifying sessions, because 2 Moto2 and 2 Moto3. The whole race up to that point, there hadn't really been particularly many issues with it, but a few laps from the end, all of a sudden, you get 3 riders going down at once at the same corner. You see them all disappear on the timing screen. You expect someone's made a strange move. No, they just all crash out together. That was Bastianini, Binder, and Alex Marquez. Yeah. All went down together. Then next lap, you've got Vinales going down the same spot. You see other riders further down the order disappearing, and all of a sudden you've got the rider that started 23rd. it's on the podium. It was ridiculous. So yeah, that was very, very strange. But I suppose we'll start off with the initial beginning. It was a fairly normal race. Marc Marquez was looking really quick. It looked like Martin had actually made the break initially, but kind of almost paralleling what happened in the main race with Marquez catching a sort of somewhat runaway leader. Marquez managed to gain that gap back, take the lead into the stadium, and the crowd went absolutely wild, didn't they?
Yeah, it was definitely a full house for Marquez this weekend. He looked good in the sprint. I still think at the moment, up until this weekend, the sprints are his best chance of getting a good result. I still think in the main races, bit of a struggle, but I've kind of maybe changed my tune after seeing the main race today. Um,
He said
yeah,
himself, didn't he? Adaptations over,
yeah,
so
that exactly. He's kind of
makes
said that
sense.
before the weekend that he's kind of feeling that it's just business as usual now, that it's more, no more kind of I need to figure this out, I need to figure that out. He's had a long enough. I think the Texas race, when he knew himself he had issues, the brake issues, that he still managed to be there and was battling them. So I'd imagine that probably set off a kind of a clicked in his head where it's like, yeah, well, kind of I know now I can do it, and it's felt probably good to him that because there was a lot of issues over that weekend, and he still managed to almost win it with a slightly uncooperative bike. So coming into this weekend, definitely felt like he could have a good weekend. He's been very good here before. Um, small mistake in the sprint leads to him crashing out on a wet patch. Remounts, and then again, people love this about him, but I don't. He just went into rage mode and started punting people out of the way. Deserved a lot more than a drop one position penalty. Should have got a long lap miles for what he did to Mir. Into the stadium section again. He completely pushes Miguel Oliveira off the line. They're the two we saw. I feel like there's a third one that I can't think of off the top of my head where he lifted someone else up quite aggressively. So again, the frustration's going to get them on the bike, which is not nice to see. I think he's at his best when he's making these brilliant overtakes at clean, but when the kind of rag drops, he still has that kind of auto war mode in him, which isn't ever good for anyone really. So
It was like being in a time machine, wasn't it? It was like going back to
yeah,
2018. It was literally like watching Termas again, because I saw on
yeah,
the graphics that like they both sort of dropped like a couple of positions, and Mir like dropped loads. I thought there's been something going on here, and it cuts to the replay, and it's like he's not even anywhere near him. It's like, how is he going to hit him here? It's like, oh, that's how.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall his sprint, other than after the crash on it, isn't great. Doesn't look good on him again. But he was very quick through the sprint and managed to catch Martin, put the overtake on him, and probably wins that. Realistically, if he
Yeah, I
doesn't have
think
the
so.
crash, I don't think anyone's getting anywhere near him. I don't think Martin comes, or yeah, Jorge Martin. I don't think he comes back at him. I think Martin was actually probably having one of his worst weekends this year so far. He was quite a bit off it, but just managed to kind of string a good result together in the sprint and get over the line. But mainly down to the fact that the form rider in front threw it away. So yeah, big improvement overall though this weekend for Mark in the sprint especially.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he got pole position. Obviously, it was sort of wet conditions, which we'd already seen him to go really well in earlier on in the season, like at Qatar when they'd done that session that was in the rain. He was top by a decent margin there. I'd be, if we get a wet race at some point, I think he'd probably just walk away with it. In all honesty, it looks like he's really got some good feeling with that bike in the rain, which is very interesting to see, considering that it's a new bike for him. But like you said, the adaptation's over. But of course, I actually did miss one incident as we were talking about that with the obviously there was the whole wet patch thing. But before that, there was a very bizarre incident at turn one with Brad Binder, Pekka Bagnaia, and Bezecchi. Now, I could not make up my mind what I thought of that incident, because every time I saw a different shot of it, I kind of saw it in a different way. I mean, when I first saw it, I saw it in the back of shot, and I literally thought Bagnaia had just done the same thing again, that he didn't port him out, just ran into the side of someone when he was trying to cut underneath him. And I thought, how has this guy done this again? But I immediately took those words back when I saw the replay, because it looked like he obviously did get sandwiched. I mean, there's not really looks like that's exactly what happened. And it looked like, oh, clear penalty for Binder. But then there was another shot where, I don't know, Binder kind of just taking a normal line through the corner, really, and they're just all getting tripped up. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things where, because it's so hard to say whose fault it is, I think racing incident maybe is the right way. Be interesting to get your opinion on it, but it definitely, because especially at the time, it's like you saw Binder do that. It's like Binder had also just been really overly aggressive with Marquez just previously, and almost caused a bit of an incident in the last corner, which something Binder kind of almost has that similar bit about him that Marquez has, that you just said that you don't like. That sometimes when maybe things aren't quite going, if he's getting overtaken by a couple of people, he gets a bit desperate. And saw it at Mandalika last year. I think he just sent Oliveira basically to the gravel. Or just we do see him occasionally do these things, but don't know, that turn one seemed like just an unfortunate incident, really, because it all happened with Bezecchi dive bombing them, then running wide and trying to cut back, and Bagnaia trying to get the cut back on Bezecchi, and then Binder trying to get the cut back on them both. A bit like that famous incident at the Pedrosa turn with Doddy, Lorenzo Pedrosa. But obviously quite big for the championship because Bagnaia, I mean, he was already dropping back in the points a little bit, but after this race today, obviously he's back up to second in the championship, so the main sort of contender, I guess, really, to Martin. And that was another no score for him in the sprint.
Yeah, I think it's a lot down to the nature of the sprint. I think everybody knows that shit. I need to be there. I can't wait. I have to go. And I think that's why there was a cutback on a cutback on a cutback on a cutback, and that's how it kind of happened. It's an unfortunate one. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I couldn't make my mind up. At first, I thought it was Binder just doing Binder things, but the more I saw it, I think it's just one of those things where he goes for something, it doesn't kind of happen and work out as it should. But I still think Racing Incident. I think it's just there's one camera angle that makes it look like that he's done nothing wrong, and that's if there's one camera angle that shows that, I think it's probably more or less down to that because some of the other camera angles make it look like he's just absolutely tried to ride through both the Ducatis, but from the other, I think it's the onboard of Bezecchi. There is the bit of a gap. Pecco's just slightly after leaving an opening. It looks like he's going wide and he goes for kind of a cutback, and it just leaves kind of Bagnaia nowhere to go. It's an unfortunate one overall, but I do probably agree that it was just borderline okay for Binder, but I wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility of being disappointed if there was a penalty. I could see him seeing that being slightly over aggressive from Binder, but I think at this point they kind of know they've kind of made their bed in terms of bringing these sprints in, because every rider is risking these moves, putting stuff on each other. So I'd say the stewards, even though they probably want a minute, probably have a slightly different rule book at hand when it comes to sprints, and just try and maybe manage a bit better, because some of these sprint races are getting a bit ugly, and this one was okay. It's borderline for me from Binder, but it's just unfortunate really that Pecco crashes, because he's not really done anything wrong. He's kind of gone for the cutback and Bezecchi, and Binder's just kind of spawned next to him, and he's kind of been left nowhere to go. And again, I always feel like when Pecco's in incidents, he can be a bit clumsy. This time, can't really blame him for anything he's done here. He's done a good cutback on the guy overtaking him, and it just happens that Binder was going for the cutback on him. It looked like it wasn't going to get a stop. So it's just an unfortunate one. Very similar to Pedrosa Corner 18, as you already mentioned.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we've both been, I think, critical of Bagnaia making these silly mistakes sometimes, but I think in this instance there wasn't a lot he could have done to avoid that. Well, there wasn't really anything he could have done. I suppose the only thing was if he'd hit the apex, obviously Binder wouldn't have been there, but you can't say that, if you need to change your line because some guy might cut underneath you, like and try and get the cut back on you when you're focused on somebody else. Like he just got completely sandwiched. Nothing that Bagnaia could do, unfortunately. So I think fortunate for him that it was a sprint race, really, and that the way that race played out, a lot of the other guys didn't score particularly well either. With obviously Marquez going down and a few others. Vinales going down. Obviously Vinales really was a bit anonymous this weekend, so it's maybe maybe the hype train's going to
I don't think, to be honest, right, he was quick when the track was good, and I think he just suffered with the conditions. I think he
lost confidence after the sprint crash on the wet patch. I don't think because he had a lot of clean air in the race, so if he'd had the pace, he would have ghosted his way through, or at least done a fastest lap or something. But he basically, ever since the rain, he looked really good on Friday, and then after that, not so much, which we've seen before. But I think this time it was the fact the track was a bit treacherous. He was actually looking decent in the sprint, because he was actually going to get the podium after the first few went down, but then obviously he then went down himself, and I think maybe that shot his confidence a bit. So he was a little bit anonymous. I'm not sure how actually I got onto that point now. I can't really remember, but yeah, the sprint race was pretty crazy.
I said Michael, you goes, oh, Maverick.
Yes. But yeah, obviously, I think worth shouting out Quartararo 23rd to 3rd. I know he lost it with the tyre pressure, but he did finish 3rd on track, and that's...
It shows the flaw in the tyre pressure rule.
Yeah, because he had to lower his pressure because he thought he was going to be behind a load of people. They all fell off.
And I believe that Pecco ran wide in the last corner on purpose in the main race to get behind Martin. because he started 7th, and obviously he has. I think because he goes so wide, he leaves 2 riders through, and you're going, okay, fair enough, the wet patch, but he seems so timid. I think that, or no, sorry, he doesn't leave. No, Mark has let 2 riders through. I think
Bagnaia did let them both through, but Bagnaia blasted back past Mark on the exit because Mark
Oh
got
yes, sorry, but yeah,
it's like GP24 turbo mode.
I wonder was that because he needed a couple of laps to kind of give him a bit of an advantage with a bit of leeway with the.
Well, he like rode on his back wheel, didn't he? Then after that, till Martin crashed. So it was
true, but that's exactly what would do to the tire. Would keep the tire in the right window so that when he did have clear air or did because like.
Yeah, that's what I mean, though. He was trying to get behind him on purpose so he could ride right behind him and get the pressure up.
Yeah.
He probably ran a lower pressure thinking he was going to be in the pack and he didn't want to.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
stupid rule.
It should. Yeah, exactly. It
well,
doesn't
it's
really.
Not stupid because it's a safety thing, but it's stupid that it has to be a thing because of the aero and the stuff. Do you think there's a way they could make the heat off the bikes like be less or something? There's some rule they could do about that.
No. That's no. Get rid of air is easier than that.
Yeah, but
these GP bikes run extremely hot, and there's no way getting rid of that really. Unfortunately, otherwise I probably would have done it a long time ago to save poor Alex's backside.
Yeah, that's very true. And just to finish off on the sprint, obviously just mentioned Quattararo there, ghosted his way through. Actually had a very good start even before the chaos. He had a really good race up until that point. But with him being demoted because of the tyre pressure rule, that allowed 4th place Danny Pedrosa to take his first ever sprint podium, which was nice to see. He had the little celebration on his own. They brought him a single step podium out and Fabio gave him the medal that he'd signed. And yeah, it was a good bit of laughing about with them. And a sprint podium before his boxing match. So I don't think we should even get into that. But
no, please not.
But I just thought I'd mention that to sort of sum up the sprint. That it's nice to see Pedrosa up there. Unfortunately, weekend didn't really quite go his. Again, was looking very good before the conditions went strange. And as much as he's there to race, and obviously when he does that, I think he does go into more of a race mode, and certainly more than he did the first time he did the wild card at Austria. I think last year and this time he's never been a lot better at getting into that race mode. But I think there is still an element where there is when you're like 40 almost, you kind of do. Maybe not push as much when there's these weird wet patches that some of these youngsters are going to go on. So, yeah, I think his weekend was a bit derailed from that. But we may as well move on to the main race now. And we've talked about it a little bit. But I suppose the biggest talking point of that race, another rider crashes out of the race lead. Seems to be a bit of a common theme happening. Obviously happened in the main race at Cota, happened in the sprint race at Jerez, happens in the main race to Jorge Martin, and strange one, very early. Didn't really look like he was going to crash before that. He's not really put a foot wrong all season. To be fair, it's definitely something he's been working on, and seemed to confuse him when he got back to the pits. Even when he watched the replay, he didn't seem too thrilled about it. Maybe under Pecco's pressure, but I feel like, maybe he was pushing a bit past it. Obviously, I don't know, I get the vibe between all the Ducati guys. It's about more than the 25 points. There's always a bit more to it, trying to prove that they're better than the other guy, and maybe they drag each other into mistakes. But odd crash, first mistake of the season, but everybody else at this point has also done that, so it's not too detrimental to him. Still pretty healthy championship lead, but he'll be wanting to forget that one pretty quickly and move on to Le Mans. But yeah, it was probably at this point, I think everyone's sort of the limit. It's just bound to happen eventually. Like, I don't think you get these Rossi seasons anymore, these Marquez seasons where you just finish first and second every race. Like, you will crash at some point, I think, now, because just the way the bike's been ridden.
Yeah, I think if you're going to have a season where you don't crash out of any races like Rossi's done in the past and some others, probably going to finish a lot on the podium, and then you're going to have races where you're going to be 5th or 6th, and that will be your limit that week. And if you don't go above and beyond, you're not going to get anything out of it. And I think at the moment in GP, you kind of, regardless of your speed, you still need to go and stretch extra just because of the aero, the ride out devices, the finicky tires, a bit of everything going on there. So I like, again, the point you make there is that everyone's kind of on the limit, but I still think that, I know, fair enough, he probably doesn't expect that crash because it goes so early, but surely you don't need to go that above and beyond when you have to, like, you should already be, in my eyes, defending a championship lead a bit. There's going to be 3, 4, 5 races this year that Martin is going to be quicker than anyone, and he's going to win probably pole, fast lap, sprint race, and main race. I think there's going to be many races this weekend or this year. He's just that good, and he's definitely, on his days, he's probably the fastest out there. I think Pecco's a better, more rounded rider. I think Martin has the ultimate ceiling, really. So I think he's just, in terms of outright speed, like we saw it last year, again, crashed out of Indonesia, about just how fast he was that day.
Yeah, that was silly in Australia with the tyre decision. And
yeah, I think he just doesn't have the full composure of a Pecco to be able to kind of build the whole weekend together as well as
we have seen Pecco crash out the lead many times, to be fair, so it's not
true.
And
but
at least it wasn't Alex Rins behind him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But
it wasn't as strange as some of Pecco's crashes. Pecco's crashes never seem to come, like, he didn't crash out of Aragon when he's battling Mac. He didn't crash today. When he's had these very strong battles, he doesn't seem to crash. He crashes when there's, like, no need to crash.
Yeah,
like,
it's
remember the Motogp crash.
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. That one was just like,
you are
really,
destroying this guy every race. His bike is terrible. You do not need to dive bomb him on the last lap.
Yeah, it was just, some of Pecco's ones are just, they just like a brain fade more than like him being unable to deal with the pressure or anything like that. So where Martin does seem to just step over the limit. I think he's probably so on the limit. He's so good. And that's probably what makes him so fast, that he's always near his limit, but sometimes he just doesn't seem to know where it is at the moment. And today's crash was unfortunate because if he doesn't crash, is it third his best? Do you think could he have battled Marquez for second or Pecco for the win? If, like, he definitely seemed as quick as Pecco. Obviously, he crashes out, so then you probably think that, well, he's probably been forced into a mistake by Pecco. He's probably over his limit to do that speed, whereas Pecco pretty much had a perfect race, you could say. So yeah, it's overall it's a difficult one to say really how Martin's going to bounce back from this, because he could go on a run and he could also crash out the next couple. We've seen him kind of do both in his GP career, where he can have really hot and cold spurts. So it's a bit of a strange one. Again, it's just not necessary. You touched at the start, like, that's not how Valentino won his career championships. Same with Lorenzo, Stoner. You don't crash out of many races in a year, and it seems like that's the norm these days, which is crazy, because you'd imagine these days Davi could nearly have a title just from the amount you stay on the bike and stuff. So
yeah, but Davi would be like down in probably like 15th now. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
Because he couldn't qualify.
Yeah,
that's
true.
Yeah.
That was Davi's biggest weakness, right? Qualifying.
Yeah, actually, I do have a slight question for you about this. The first lap, obviously, Bagnaia goes around the outside of two people into turn 6. It was ridiculous. It was so good. It was one of the best moves I've ever seen. Like, genuinely.
He did it last year too.
Yeah, he did do it last year, didn't he? And he did it
but
at
over
Shank
one
last year as well, didn't he? I mean, I know he didn't pull it off, but that's because Martin was like, "No, not today, mate." Just basically let the brake off and ran him to the edge of the track. Something I think Quartararo did it at Austria a few years ago. In the wet race.
Yeah.
And
Mugello turn 1, which is even more scary.
Yeah, it's but like my point is that, like, Bagnaia was so good on the brakes into that corner. Do you think Martin was having to push a little bit more to make sure he couldn't pass him in there, and he just got it wrong on that occasion, or it was like maybe overheating his tyre or whatever? Because every lap he was getting a really good run through 5, almost hitting Martin through Sito Pond's corner, and then down towards turn 6 he'd just sort of pull out. I feel like he probably could have sent it if he wanted to. I feel like he maybe was sitting back a bit. But at the same time, Martin was braking so late that, like, he would have had to try. It wasn't like he would have just rode past him. So do you think that probably factored into his crash? Because, well, I think you already answered it, but
definitely, because you can sense how close Jorge Martin would have known how close Pecco was at every lap. And you've also seen that you've gotten a good start, and then you just see this big red bike come down the outside into turn 6, go a little bit deep, and then just come around back in front of you. You go, oh my god, he has something seriously going on. Full tank of fuel. The tyres still aren't perfectly in the window by the time you get to turn 6. It's so risky. I cannot get over how much he's risked there. And the fact he's won today's race and he's done all the battling with Mark and stuff, that is like that Pecco we had today. This is why we
It's the best race
sometimes
of his career, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's because he's done so much. He qualified seventh, was leading. How many laps into the race did he get into the front? He got to the front quite early. Was it lap one? No,
yeah,
100% like
yeah,
lap.
because he attacked Marquez into the last corner, didn't he? And Marquez sort of lent it
he
across
went,
him, but then ran wide.
yeah,
And he took the lead.
Yeah, so it's just if we had this Pecco every week, oh God, you'd be thinking we have another kind of Marquez-esque kind of period where we're going to go on 4 championships, 5 championships, or whatever he may be able to do. But it's just a shame that he has the Pecco of the stupid mistakes where he just goes missing weekends and ends up doing these silly things that he does no need to be doing.
It's a whole Portimao weekend. He was miles in the lead in the sprint, bottled that by trying to brake too late into the corner, even though it had warnings. And then, okay, he was a bit off it in the race, maybe set up for reason, but he decided to ram another rider instead of finishing 5th.
Yeah. It just, for me as well, it's just he's probably a modern day rider where like none of them are as kind of mentally strong as Rossi was, or Doohan or Schwantz, or kind of go back 2 years, and you always think that they were just better overall as probably men. In a weird way to say it, you just think they weren't as kind of fragile. Whereas I can't trust
they don't
Pecco
have
as
as much
much.
in hand over each other anymore. That's the thing. I think because
They probably are closer to the limit, but then at the
so
same time,
and then like
Rossi, Lorenzo on equal equipment, pretty much you're on the same bike. You surely don't have much over each other there. Like they're absolutely. Like,
yeah, I guess
if you go back,
that's what the
if
only
you go
time
back
it's really
to
ever happened, isn't it? Really, the two really good. I mean, it was doing Crivy, but Crivy was not on.
Doohan always had a bit though, but like if you go back to 08, 09, some of the races were like so dull and boring because they were all on the limit and they were like a 10 quicker here, 10 quicker there. There wasn't very much in it in terms of, obviously we had some brilliant battles throughout them years, but there was a lot of races where 2 seconds to Stoner, 2 seconds to Lorenzo, 2 seconds to Rossi, and that was your race. There was some very processional races through that era, but again, I think it's because they were on the limit of what they could do at the time, whereas now we're probably seeing them
about other guys either. Like if you're Rossi and you don't have Lorenzo's pace today, you just finish second behind him. Like it's not that bad. Whereas if you're a bit off you're going to finish like 6th, where you can't do that because that's too many points. So you're going to have to try, and I think that's where these mistakes come from sometimes. But
yeah, that's a very solid point. I'll give you that. But the depth of field, if you're like modern JGP, if you're off it, you're like, where was the late today before you crashed? 15th, 17th?
Nowhere. Actually, what was that move, by the way? What was he even trying there?
It's your modern day GP riders. It's just all modern day GP riders have this in them. It's just like,
is it just so hard to pass because of the time?
Everything, yeah, exactly. Everything is against modern day GP riders in my eyes, because you have social media, you have all that, you have all the other TV stuff. The bikes have changed so much since 2020 even. The tyres clearly haven't kept up, and there's more races than ever. There's a lot going on in modern day GP that we haven't had before, and that's probably putting a lot of these errors down to, because like the Morbidelli Miller one, that was another just stupid one where you could probably blame either party, or you could say Reds incident. The L8 one,
I don't think Miller did anything wrong there, in fairness. I think Morbidelli just got it wrong.
You could probably argue Miller could sit. I know I've only seen it once, and I haven't watched it back.
I guess a bit like what Costa had to do on lap 1 with Zarco,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if you're going to pass someone at the inside, you can't just understeer into them like at a corner like that.
That's true too. Yeah, that's true
the
too.
whole
Whereas
Chance Davies Melandri thing, where he said he was like a spoiled brat or something, like it was a very similar incident to that. It was
true, but again, I just think that to make an overtake, people are going into these weird situations where at the end of a back straight, you can't. They're braking so late now. You can't really make any difference anywhere. So there's that kind of conundrum of, well, if I can't do anything anywhere, I'll have to try something stupid, and that's probably what's happened in both cases today. With Frankie and with Elate, that they both kind of again into the same corner, just in two different parts of it. But just overall, it's a similar. I have to try when I get a chance, even though I might be able to do it. We might walk crash, and well, we've seen 4 riders crash in that corner today because of the rider behind trying something that probably wasn't on. But we probably didn't see that. He probably rode behind that rider for 5, 6 laps and saw that like I cannot
His
outbrake
tyre
him
pressure's going
anywhere.
through the ceiling. He's going to get a penalty if he
Yeah,
doesn't pass him.
exactly. Yeah, just all these things adding up, and he's like, well, I'm gonna have to try a Hail Mary and see what I can do with it. But
Yeah, if you don't pass
yeah,
him in 2 laps, you're going to be out that window and get an 8-second penalty, which is race over. So you're going to have to send it. You know,
yeah.
maybe that does play into their heads. We don't know really.
Oh, 100%. You
They
definitely
have a
think it could
light.
like
They have a light to tell them if they're over the pressure. I think so.
yeah.
Yeah,
It is unfortunate in some aspects. Yeah.
it's it's very strange. But I suppose we just talk about Bagnaia, how well of a race he did. Obviously, Martin had the crash, but really the main part of the race was the battle between Bagnaia and Marquez. We've had a couple in the past, but we've never had one where they've been on equal terms. Obviously, we've had Aragon 21. Marquez was not only on a worse bike, also had 90 degree out of. No, wasn't 90. Wasn't
20,
90
23 degrees.
23
I think
degrees out of arm out of
he's
6.
90 degrees out. He was using his elbow for the
Yeah,
ball.
well, hey, look, he did have his elbow up when he was trying to cut his dinner and that, didn't he? He did say that. So, yeah, but so not tipped against Marquez in that one. So that lost. Le Mans 22 was it? They had some. Was it 23? Can't remember. It was a race at Le Mans, and
Definitely wasn't 23 because Pecco crashed. Must have been 22.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, Pecco could have still crashed anyway. He crashed with Vinales, but yeah, they had a bit. It wasn't for the win, but they were having a proper scrap. It might have been the sprint. Yeah, I think it was last year's sprint race.
It's too many races. It's all
Either way, yeah, they've had some proper battles. But this is the first time they've had. This is the closest equipment parity they've had. Obviously, still not quite on the same bike, but it's close enough. It's close enough, and Pecco comes out on top, which is. Well, I wouldn't have expected that, honestly, but this is why I think it's one of his best races he's ever done. Obviously, the damage was done early on, I think. Marquez sort of self-admittedly was a bit stiff in the beginning laps because, we always say, oh, he's this superhuman guy, but he has crashed out the last 2 races effectively, and, he needs to, and in 3 races in total, if you consider the Portimao one as well, although it wasn't like a riding mistake. There was obviously contact with the rider, so it was, however you sit on the fence, that wasn't like he was losing the front or whatever. But that's a lot of points, so he didn't want to crash. But I think once he got into the race, I think he dropped back. He obviously got passed by Bezzecchi and stuff. Then I think he had to probably take, again, let the temperature come back to his front tyre to try and pass Bezzecchi. And then obviously he hunted down Bagnaia, sat behind Bagnaia. I think he said it in his interview that he had to pass him basically the first time. If you don't pass the first time, your tyre then just goes out the window. And I think that's kind of what happened. But how they stayed on in that stadium section, I have no idea. Marquez obviously was gaining every lap through those 2 fast left-handers into the Angel Nieto corner up the inside. Bit wide he goes, but that's obviously where he was making all his passes yesterday, where he crashed yesterday. Bagnaia gets the cutback. Marquez just chucked it in like he wasn't there. It was definitely I hope this guy backs out kind of thing, or just try and force him to back out. But Bagnaia didn't. There was a bit of contact. They almost then collided again on the exit as Marquez was trying to straighten the bike back up, and then he actually think about trying to go around the outside of him, that right hander? Because that was
He definitely, to be honest, right,
he
probably he tried to maybe line him up for something to, like, the way you kind of think a couple of corners ahead. He probably thought, if I go on the outside here, he might try and defend the inside, compromise himself through Crivi and Ferrari, and then I get a cut back through Ferrari and get the run into the last corner. So I think Mark isn't stupid. I think he knew that turn 7, 8 and into the stadium section is the only place he could make a pass. He isn't doing it into turn 1. He isn't doing it into Pedrosa. So I just think that he was probably thinking, right, well, we have slightly different compromising lines here, or I'm going to have to try something and think out of the box. Because, again, he did it once to Pecco. Pecco was like, yeah, that's fine. And then Pecco did the absolute Aragon thing of, you go past me, you go wide, I cut back and take the normal line, and you just do not pass me, and then, to be fair, after a couple of goals, that was that. Like, there was nothing really Mark could do, because Pecco pulls out these absolute world beater laps.
Last but one lap, and
then yeah, it's just, he just shows why on his day he is definitely deserving to be at least 2-time world champion. Probably should have got maybe a third one in 21 if he didn't kind of flush those lines there. But I suppose the first one is the hardest to win. But yeah,
It was
I
kind of an
could.
outside shot in 21, wasn't it? Really, because there was still like 2 rounds left when Fabio won it. So it was,
Yeah, it was always kind of up against it, but I still think that year he probably should have been better elsewhere and probably could have maybe done better overall.
if
But
he'd started the season,
yeah, exactly. But no, this is the Pecco that we know, and this is the Pecco that we love to see, and this is why we kind of big him up probably a lot on this podcast, because he is capable of doing this. He is capable on his day of being. Don't really like using the term alien, like, but that is the grading system in MotoGP. If you're an alien, if you say the aliens, you know exactly who you're talking about. And again, modern day MotoGP are lacking of these aliens, as many people have said, and can't really disagree. But today, that was a proper alien performance, because Marquez in Spain, pretty much equal equipment, the crowd, the advantage Marquez had in the couple of corners that where he could almost overtake. It was ridiculous. At one point, I think 3/10 when he was catching me, took out in them two corners.
That was one lap. I think he might have took four on one of the laps. It was crazy. I think
silly.
I don't know if Bagnaia made a
crazy.
slight mistake, because it was one of those laps where he was about 6 tenths behind, and then all of a sudden he was dive bombing him.
Yeah. So yeah, very good from Pecco, very good from Marquez. Thankfully, they kept it clean. Again, the only criticise I could say of Pecco was again the fact that he just kind of rides into him in the second of the stadium section, sticks his wheel in. Now again, he gets away with it. Like, that easily could have been a crash, and that's another DNF. And like, we could have been talking how we could have sat here now and been in a situation of that. He had a brilliant port. Marquez passed him, he overtook him and then gapped him immediately, and the incident doesn't happen, because I think a lot of his moves are 50-50. They might get off and they might be perfect and you might get away with it, whereas sometimes then we have the unfortunate crashes that we've seen. So I just think Pecco needs to kind of pick and choose his battles a bit more carefully in the future. But
I
today he
disagree
gets away
slightly with that, actually.
with which they need to pick his battles, or that he gets away with it.
In this instance, he shouldn't have sort of. I mean, I don't think he really rode into him, because I think Marquez
he's
actually
kind of
tripped the bike
alongside it.
out,
I think this one isn't as bad as some of the
I
other
think
ones.
you
But the fact
have
that he's
to keep your bike there in that situation, because if you back out, then Marquez knows you'll back out like every time if he does that to you.
yeah,
So
I suppose he's probably racing the man, not the track, in a way. I suppose
it wasn't like they were not fighting for 25 points today. They were fighting over much more than that.
There's been rumours coming out that Marcus said in the hour-long meeting that he's annoyed that he can already beat Pecco. That's why Pecco's annoyed, because he can already beat him.
That was funny when they said that.
That's a massive slap in the face. Like, that's a talent outweighed the ambition kind of situation of, like, real pettiness from Marcus thrown back at him. And I think Pecco, when he's up against it, can be in his best state. I think it's when he's expected he actually kind of faltered a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to be really interested going forward to see if Pecco can bring this form forward, because he's been a bit wayward so far. But yeah, today was just brilliant for both of them. You have to take your hat off, really. There's nothing else you can say about the situation overall.
Yeah, I think they were both pretty happy coming out of it, because, I mean, for one, at the end of the day, they are bike racers. They just love a good battle, don't they? Like, I think even when you come off second best, if you had a really good battle, there's some element of enjoyment. And I think Marcus was happy to just finally get a podium in the main race and basically prove that he could do it. Because I think if there's another lap, I think he's started to catch up to him again, I think. But yeah, it was Bagnaia has so much in hand in those last three rights. Marcus couldn't get close enough to him, which I think was partially. It sounds like it's partially down to the injury, actually, that he just can't.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
do them that well anymore. I mean, remember when he went over the gravel, like when
that was crazy in 1918. That was outrageous.
So
that was one of those things where, like, oh my god, this guy is walking on water here. Like, there was a couple of years there of Marquez winning championships easy that we've been robbed of.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it was a proper good scrap between them, and I think today has shown that they definitely will take each other out again. There is no doubt. There's no doubt that they will take each other out again. I would say for Mark's sake, he best hope it's not Masana or Mugello where that happens. But
exactly.
To be honest, I don't think Mugello will happen. I don't think.
I think Mark will struggle a lot at Mugello. He's never been good there, even though he's on a Ducati now. I think Pecco is brilliant there.
Pecco's very good though, yeah.
So it's going to be
Masana.
tough to see him coming.
Marquez has been pretty good there before, so we'll see.
That will be like Pecco's won today in Spain. I think Marquez will be thinking, let's wait till we get to Milan, let's see what I can do.
Like Mario Kart, Rossi will be chucking bananas over the
Yeah,
field.
exactly. Oh God.
Yeah, I think he was loving life today after seeing that. But,
Yeah, seeing his two boys on the podium, Marquez not winning. Jesus, what could be better?
seeing it's not even make the joke. So
Yeah, let's move on.
so I suppose talking to VR46, last thing, Marco Bezzecchi. I mean, the whole team looked a bit better this weekend. The VR46 team, both him and Digi, but Bezzecchi especially, much more like his last season, was qualified well. I think that's the difference. He just qualified well, because if you get away at the front, I think everyone's got such good pace for MotoGP. I mean, what lap was it where like Morbidelli set like the fastest lap, like early on in the race?
Lap
It's like
three, I think.
everyone's doing the same pace. It's just you get caught basically behind someone, and then you kind of have to drop back. And so I think that's the big difference. The fact that maybe the rain played in his favour in the qualifying, allowed him to qualify a bit better. But I think he'd looked a bit better anyway. In the race, he didn't look out of his depth. The first
No,
time,
not
really,
at all.
there's been a GP23 actually anywhere near Marquez. Like Marquez has been, I mean, like as much as we've had Marquez obviously crashing a couple of times, making a few little mistakes, but he's had so much in hand over all the other GP23s. Like, yes, he's being beat by the guys on the GP24 bike, but I think it is a better bike. I think it's not unfair to say. But over the other bikes, he's just had so much in hand. Whereas this weekend, they all seemed a bit closer. Actually, even Alex seemed a bit closer. A bit more like he did in Qatar. In fact, they all seemed a bit...
Yeah.
Well, Bezzecchi actually was off it in Qatar. The other two were a bit more on it in Qatar. But yeah, it was good to see Bezzecchi back at the front. Maybe he'll factor in some of these races again. It definitely was one of those Ducati domination sort of weekends. I think they had the whole front rows themselves, didn't they? They locked out the podium. I think they locked out the top four in the actual race. They probably would have locked out the podium in the sprint if there hadn't been all of the weird issues with the track dampness and things like that, obviously, which resulted in Acosta getting on the podium, which actually probably worth noting. He had a big crash in warm up. I think this probably seemed to affect him because he was sort of a bit off it in the race. I mean, he still finished 10th, not too bad as a rookie, that's for sure. And I'm not certain, but fairly sure it was. Well, I was about to say fairly sure it was in front of Miller. Yes, of course it was in front of Miller because he got taken out. But I think he was beating Miller at that point anyway, and
He was, yeah.
And he obviously beat Augusto Fernandez. So again, another good, decent result from him. But yeah, he definitely seemed to be a bit affected by probably the warm up crash because he just didn't quite seem to have it in the main race.
Yeah, it was a strange one, and he seemed in the sprint a lot of times the camera cut him, and you'd see him adjusting on corner entry, adjusting to avoid the wet patches. He was the only one that I could see that could actually visibly see them.
It wasn't it? Yeah.
He was about the only one that I could see. Others had crashed on it before they could even see them. Whereas, in fairness to Pedro, he'd enter a corner and you just see him kind of just like cat-like reflex where he'd pick the bike up and just move slightly off the racing line and find a different way through the corner. And that's probably why he was one of the very, very few riders that either didn't get a penalty or crash in that race. So, yeah, in fairness to him, he did a really brilliant job. I think his qualifying, he got punted by Zarco to start the main race. I actually don't think his main race was that bad. I just think modern day MotoGP, you just can't come back from that far down. Yeah. So far, I think we've seen him basically qualify well, good start and be there, and that's why he's able to do the race he's done so far. Whereas at one point he was 18th to come back to 10th. So I think he's had another very good race and overall a good weekend, even though people are thinking, oh, it's his first shaky on. I don't think it was shaky. I think he just had
but he had a sprint podium. It wasn't that bad. I mean, I know he was a little bit off it in that race pace, I think, wise, but it's not like it wasn't a bad weekend. It's just because he was so good in all the other ones.
His pace in the main race was still quite strong, and the fact that, again, he did get punted lap one by Zarco, so it was just... these things happen when you're in the middle of the pack, and again, his qualifying in the wet, he probably is on the front row if he doesn't crash in that final corner. So, like, we could be talking about how Pedro has got a sprint and podium in the main race again. So, it was just another really strong one. And again, he isn't a massive fan of this track, so maybe when we get to... I actually think he likes Le Mans quite a bit.
He does, yeah, because he crashed out of the lead there twice, I think, actually. But
Yeah. First Moto 2 win came there as well, wasn't it? Or am I right in saying that?
No, his first Moto2 win was at Mugello, I think. He was leading at Le Mans, but he fell off, and Augusto won.
Oh, yeah, I fell off in La Chapelle, I
Yeah, La
believe.
Chapelle, yeah. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the first
but anyway,
weekend where he kind of started to put together a Moto2.
yeah.
But yeah, I suppose that pretty much brings us to the end of the race topics then. So hopefully you have enjoyed this episode. We will be back for the French Grand Prix. Is it 2 weeks' time? Or
2 weeks, correct,
two
yeah.
weeks' time. Yeah, because I always manage to get the actual number of weeks wrong because I never have a clue. I just know which round is coming up next. Never know how far it is away. So if you did enjoy that one, if you are listening on Spotify, if you could rate the podcast 5 stars, it really helps us out. Or if you are watching on YouTube, do like the video. And of course, let us know if you have any feedback in either comment sections below. But like I said, we will see you in Le Mans for the next race.